Rev up your engines! Carlos Sanchez says, Scotty, do you think the government will do another cash for clunkers program like Obama did in '08 to put more EVs on the road? Now, it wouldn't shock me if they tried something like that. But the problem is, when they did the cash for clunkers, it wasn't that much money that they gave for the clunkers, and it wasn't like they handed you money. They gave you credit for getting a car that gets better gas mileage, right? Well, of course, most of it was a total joke because the people that were selling the new or used cars, when they saw it was cash for clunkers, whatever the government gave them, right, they just jacked the price of the car up that same amount of money. So basically, you were getting nothing. And the EV cars are so expensive as it is. Let's face the facts. If you're driving a clunker, why are you driving a clunker? Because you don't have much money, right? Are you going to be able to afford a $60,000, $100,000 electric car? Of course not. No matter what kind of little credit they give you, you're not going to be able to afford a car like that. That's why you're driving a clunker in the first place. The government, of course, never thinks of that. They're, oh, look, we're helping those poor people out as they drink champagne and have their election parties to get money in their back pocket so they can be elected next time, you know. How can we help those poor people? Let's give them credit for their clunkers on a new car that costs $60,000 to $100,000. Adam says, Scotty, what could cause a power steering light to flash when idling? I read somewhere the battery of the alternator. Is it true? Well, here's the thing. Your power steering light is flashing. That is warning you have a problem with your power steering system. You have a modern car, and the modern cars have electronic power steering. When that light flashes, it means there's a problem and there's a trouble code. So you go to a mechanic like me, we put our fancy scan tools, we start analyzing. It could be the motor boost is starting to break, it could be a short in the wiring, it could be a lot of things. But you need to have a mechanic check it out because as that light's flashing, it means there's a code and you got to get a code. You can test your alternator and battery, but that is not going to make that flash on and off. That would make your battery light flash on and off, warning you that your charging system isn't working. So you got a problem with your electronic power steering. You need a good mechanic to analyze it with a scan tool. A cheap scan tool doesn't read power steering code. You need a mechanic like me that's got a fancier scan tool. Remy Lawyer says, do you think modern cars are more crappy made than the 90s cars? They last longer in the 90s. Paint, motor, parts last longer. A lot of things, yes. I think the 90s were kind of like the high watermark of automotive stuff. I mean, my 94 Celica is still running like a clock with 250,000 miles on it. I mean, they made them, well, at least the Japanese did. In the 90s, a lot of American cars were already crap. The Japanese, Toyota, Honda, they made pretty much bulletproof cars back in the day. And I guess they're realizing planned obsolescence to the Americans. Why would you want to make a vehicle that lasts for 1,000,000 miles? Then you're not going to sell that many of them people, right? So now they're kind of fine. They do have to say, the later model Lexuses, the later model Toyotas that I've seen, they're not as bulletproof as the old ones used to be. I see them having problems when they're brand new, when they're a couple of years old that they didn't used to see. So a lot of it, of course, has to do with the use of plastics because plastic is cheap. Metal is stronger. Plastic's going to eventually crack and break, and then you got to replace expensive computer parts made out of plastic instead of having a metal part that could last forever. And that's just because they can make them cheaper that way. Shrikant says, Scotty, I got 2014 Nissan Altima, 68,000 miles. Whenever I stop accelerating, my car jerks forwards. Is this a major problem? Those have one of the worst transmissions in the world. Jatco, it's called. Nissan owns Jatco. They make the crappiest trannies. It could be your tranny going out. That's a typical sign of a Nissan, that you're accelerating and when you let go of the gas, it starts jerking, and then it's going to be a big problem. You're going to need a new transmission or have yours rebuilt, which costs a small fortune. So it could be that. Now, on the other hand, if you got a clogged fuel filter, you got worn spark plugs, it could also do that. So start with the simple things first. Check your air filter. Change your fuel filter. Look at the spark plugs. See if they're worn out. Have your computer scanned by a guy like me, because if your car is really stuttering, generally, if it doesn't have any codes and your check engine light is on, that's just the beginning. There'll be bad data in the computer. And mechanics like myself will analyze all that data and say, okay, look, this particular system, maybe your fuel injectors, you see, they're not all firing correctly. One cylinder's misfiring. Then you know what to look at. But start simple. A lot of times it's a simple thing. But if it is a transmission, my advice is get rid of that pile of crap as soon as you can, get a better car, like a Toyota or a Honda. Dan Thiemann says, why did they stop Saturn Car Company instead of one of the other GM car companies? Okay, well, here's the thing. They're more or less GM. It doesn't matter. There's no Buick company, Cadillac company. It's all GM. And GM came up with the idea, oh, we're going to make Saturn. Well, the quality was too low, And it got worse as time went on because GM screwed everything up. Originally, the fancy Saturns had Honda V6 engines in them. Well, they're great engines, right? But Honda uses Honda coolant, right? And GM said, we're not going to use Honda coolant in those engines. We have our own Dexcool coolant. We're only going to use it for all our cars, so to you. So Honda said to them, it said, we're not selling any V6 engines anymore. Then they started putting GM-made V6 engines, which were crap, and they all blew head gaskets and came apart. And then the Saturns had a horrible reputation, and then they stopped making them. It was just a disaster area, like most things GM gets involved in. That's just the way that it goes. And their other ones aren't really different companies anyway. They just aren't in name only. Like Rolls-Royce, the English luxury car. Hey, BMW bought them ages ago. They're German cars now. Yeah, there's a name. Don't be fooled by names. Andrew Gonzalez says, what's your opinion on a 2005 Toyota Celica GTS? Reliability as a sports car. Okay, well, that's funny. I had a 2004 Celica here. Woman brought it over. Father bought it for her for a graduation present. Running like a clock, right? But it was the Celica GT. The problem is, you get the fancy GTSs. Those had the Yamaha designed engines, and every single customer I know that had one of those went through at least 2 or 3 engines. They had flaws in them, and they would blow up. They had more horsepower, but they did it at high RPMs, and for various reasons. One of them was the oil pump, and the oil pan was designed wrong, so they'd cavitate when you cornered hard. They would suck air, and then, of course, air sucked into the oil pump, then it has no oil pressure, and the engines would blow up. If you're looking at the ones that had the non-Yamaha designed engine, those can run forever. That's the same engine in my wife's '07 Matrix. They're great engines. And the funny thing is, they're both 1.8 liter engines, but it was the Yamaha designed engine that had the extra horsepower, and it wasn't insane. It was like 185 or something. It wasn't like they were race cars. That's the problem with those. I wouldn't buy one of those because of that. The engines have had all kinds of problems. Outdoor 74 says, Scotty, is electric power steering better to have than hydraulic in a pickup? The main reason they went to electronic power steering is because it's cheaper to make, and the computers can control them. They want computers to control everything. They're cheaper to make. And they get slightly better gas mileage because they don't have a big pump that puts up 1,500 PSI. It's all done with electronics, which uses less actual power. That's why they do it. Hydraulic power steering's been around for over 100 years. It's pretty proven, right? The problem with the electric ones is they're only as good as the electric motors and assemblies they put in. And some companies, they're crap and they break all the time, and then they cost a fortune to replace something that might last 300,000 or 400,000 miles hydraulics. You'll find when the electronics break, oh man, I got to spend thousands now putting this new assembly in. That's the problem. They work fine, you know, the engineers have it, so you turn it, it feels normal, and they work perfectly fine. But when they break, they cost a fortune, and they're electronic, so they are going to break. And if you got a big pickup truck, what do you do with big pickup trucks? You go all over the place, go through water and mud and stuff. Well, guess what? Water and mud destroys electronic parts eventually, where they don't bother hydraulic system whatsoever. Colin Barrett says, I got a Japanese Toyota Belta with a 1K RFE engine. It's been running on E5 gasoline for years, and I have to use E10. Is there anything I should watch for? Okay, you shouldn't have any problems at all. You're going from 5% ethanol, 95% gasoline, to 10% ethanol, 90% gasoline, right? So it's not that different. And the engineers aren't stupid when they put the 10% ethanol in. They have additives to the gasoline so that it doesn't hurt anything. It isn't like they just have gasoline, oh, we'll pour 10% alcohol in, see what happens. No, they have all kinds of additives and stuff. So you shouldn't have to worry anything at all. But let's say this car is a toy for yours. The problem with E10 and E15 is you can't store it as long as regular gasoline. The alcohol and stuff will start to separate after so many months. So if it's a car that you don't drive all that much, you'd probably be better off using regular gasoline if you can buy it that has no ethanol in it if it's a toy. But if it's an everyday driver, just keep driving it. It's going to do anything. Scooby-Doo22 says, I got mice in the 250 air filter. I cleaned the MAF throttle body, but the HVAC doesn't work at all. What could be the problem? How do I keep mice out? Get a cat. Now, believe it or not, you can buy 12-volt ultrasonic noise producers to get rid of rats. They do not like them. Now, I always wondered, do those things actually work, right? So years ago, I tested them. And I can test them pretty good because I have ultrasonic headphones, and I got a system called Marksman. It picks up ultrasonic sound. They say, humans can't hear it, but mice can, right? Well, when you put on the headphones and have the ultrasonic detector, you hear it. And it sounds like, it goes up and down and it drives them nuts. You can hook one of those up, 12-volt system, hardly uses any power, and it'll generally chase them away. Now, since you had mice or rats under there, now your HVAC doesn't work. Start checking all the wiring for your HVAC system. They probably chewed through some of the wires, maybe popped some of the fuses. They like chewing on wires for some reason. That 12 volts gives them a thrill. It's like some kind of drug to the mice and rats. They chew on them, and a little 12 volt gives them a thrill. It's not power to hurt anything. The mice seem to like chewing on them, and they probably wiped out some of your wiring for your HVAC system. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.